philosophical problem, because that's kind of that, like, that's that twisting feeling in your chest and your gut, you know, that something is just wrong.
If you have an existing brand, cool. Do you have the right messaging?
Yeah.
You know, like just asking yourself and being open, holding your business with open hands. And
I'm gonna plant a flag in the ground and say,
but you can't see trustworthiness. It's not a real thing until someone acts trustworthy.
welcome to the Brand Nerd Podcast. I'm Mitch Metter. Join me as we nerd out over great brands, study the latest business tech, and learn proven strategies from experts and entrepreneurs. Let's get started. What up, nerds? We're back at it.
Yes.
This is season 0 of the Brand Nerd Podcast. If you want to know what that means, listen to the last episode, or we're going to get into it a little bit at the end of this one if everything goes according to plan. Once again, I'm here with Pete Rodriguez. He's a longtime collaborator. And he's also the design director at Brand Nerd. So today, this episode, we're calling Branding for Dummies.
Yeah.
I've always liked those Dummies books. Do you ever read any Dummies books?
Once.
Okay.
One time in high school, and that was it.
Yeah.
So I know they were pretty popular, but yeah, never got into them.
There was a point in time when that was like the go-to resource for.
Well, I could think. It's
topics.
the yellow book with the black text, or
Mm-hmm.
black bubbles or something with white text.
It's a yellow, it's like a yellow frame,
Yes.
and then it's like usually like a, I don't know if I'm remembering correct, like a Futura, like it'll say like branding, and then for dummies in like a handwritten
Scribble,
chalkish font. Yeah.
Branding for dummies. Well, really, we're going to be asking questions, and the question is for anyone in business, whether they're starting something new or you've been in business, you've gotten work, but you're now considering brand. You're starting to think about that more. And what does my brand mean? How do I establish my brand? Who do I go to? Like all those things. So why should anyone care about a brand?
That's a good question. And I'm gonna plant a flag in the ground and say that your brand is your most valuable business asset.
Yeah. Aside, what would you say? Okay, fair. What would you say is some other things, like maybe a second and third place valuable business asset?
Yeah, I think
that's number one.
I think brand touches so many things, which is why I'm confident planting that flag. I think the other part of your business that feeds into your brand for sure is like operations. Like, I guess the way I've typically seen it laid out is your business kind of has your marketing side, and sales is included in marketing, and then there's the operations side, and that's kind of the left brain, right brain of the business. Yeah. Marketing is all about how do you get the customers in. Operations is all about how do you deliver the product. But I think brand takes into account all of those things, which is why I think it's your most important asset, and it's the spot that you start when you're thinking about starting a business, or if you're going, hey, we need to take this to the next level. I think brand is the conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah. And there's benefits to having good branding. I mean, Mitch and I both have seen businesses that value branding and the difference that makes versus a business that is just operating on solely word of mouth. Word of mouth is not bad. That's fantastic. Or just, especially local business. This is not just geared for local businesses, but when you're a local business, word of mouth tends to be easier to obtain because you're in a more, honed in community, right? And people hear about your whatever. But outside of that, it's like, what are the benefits of business? How do you actually, I don't know, like just to make a long story short, we've seen the businesses that value it and don't value it. And it's just a night and day difference between those two. And it's critical to start considering those things. And it made a big difference for us. We both are in creative spaces. So we've kind of always been brand first kind of guys, but it's something we probably take for granted because a lot of people have a lot of questions about brand. And there's massive benefits. So being in demand.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, if you're the type of person who's hesitant about branding and you think it's wishy-washy or it's hard to define, you're not incorrect.
Right.
If I had to define brand, I would essentially say it's the expectations that a company sets and then how well it delivers against those expectations. So if you set an expectation that you deliver value, in other words, you deliver what you are worth or more for what they are paying. So if I pay, if it's if you want to put a new roof on your house, there are companies that'll come out and they're a cheap company. They're a price company. It's cheap, cheap, cheap. You don't expect much other than the price to be right. And the old saying, you get what you pay for. At the end of the day, you're like, oh man, my yard's a wreck. My, maybe the roof is keeping rain out, I hope, of my home. But, hey, at least I saved money on this. Then there's other companies that deliver value. And that value is usually more in the terms of we cost a little more, but what you get out of that is a better finished product. We don't make a mess in your yard. We clean up after ourselves. We use products that last a long time, and we install them correctly so that you get the best out of it. A third would be like a premium brand.
Yeah.
And a premium brand, if we're using roofing as the analogy, they would use high-end products and they would have potentially a lot of like upsells or, really cover all the bases in terms of roof. So you would actually, your home's going to look not like it just got a new roof, but like a whole new house potentially.
And your brand is determining where you land amongst those three circumstances, right? You're either the cheap guy. It's a part of it. It's positioning. It's brand position. How your brand is positioned in the marketplace will determine whether you're premium. Will determine whether, at least perceived, right? Perceived premium.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're saying is, you started off by saying the aspiration versus what's actually happening. The
expectation.
So the expectation. I love that language because what that communicates is you could have high aspirations as a business with no, what was the word again? The other one, I keep forgetting it. Aspiration versus
expectation.
Yeah. So they need to match. What are your aspirations as a business? What are you saying? Here's all the things we want to do. And then on the receiving end of that, as the paying customer or client, what are their expectations of you as a business? When those things perfectly align, that's where it's like it builds what? Trust.
Right.
They say, I know that person is going to deliver on what they said they were going to deliver on. And that is where brand really happens. It's like the moment where those things perfectly kiss. It's like the stars align and those things kiss and then brand is made.
Right. So when you have a brand and you find your people, that's what it's all about, right? Finding your people. We know big brands in fashion, and it's easy to be a big brand in fashion once you're established because people will pay anything for your t-shirt that probably didn't cost a whole lot more to make than anybody else's t-shirt. But because you have your logo on it, your branding, you can charge a premium. That's not really what we're talking about here. Although there's an aspect of that can be universal for any company. But the reason you want to establish a brand is because there are customers who will fit your brand, and then you can be in demand, you can charge what you're worth, and you create happy customers that come back, that tell their friends, that leave reviews.
Right.
And that is how a company makes progress. And that's how, it's a snowball effect. Once you've narrowed in your brand, you've found your people, and you are doing a good job at delivering on the expectations that you've set for them. That's how businesses can grow through branding.
Yeah. I think that's something I found to be true in my business. I started off, I'm a designer. And so I started off doing a lot of different kind of design. And over time have found myself doing more logos, more brand identity.
Yeah.
So the visual aspect of the design of branding. And it's been interesting because that's the majority of what I do. And then there's still a small percentage. I think every designer still gets their hands in emails and, you know, pamphlets every once in a while and different things like that. But you know, we could even go on and on about niching down, not niching down, but like even within your thing, you can go further. You become further an expert and be even more specific. So I do logos for, I know a guy, you know, a guy who does logos for outdoors, just outdoors businesses, exclusively outdoors. So you do anything outdoors, he does your branding. He's good at that. And I think that's great. You know, he knows his lane, and it's like, there's a lot of benefit in niching like that. So,
and brand identity is one of the things that is part of a brand, and it's kind of the gateway to everything else. So it's a great thing to talk about. One of a story that comes to mind is every morning I drive by this yard sign, and I think my guess is that this business owner, this is his home, but he puts one of his yard signs. It's an HVAC company, and they put, you know, when they do work on a house, they put a yard sign out there. Yep. It's a red sign with white lettering, and it is the classic papyrus font. You know, you know the papyrus, and all it says is his company name. You know, and that's what sits there. And I drive by and I go, that guy, I assume it's a guy, might have an amazing service that he delivers. He might be the best HVAC guy on the planet, but most people that are driving by that sign are not calling him. No. Because what that sign communicates is, I barely know what I'm doing. Right. You know, like I didn't even have the time or energy or wherewithal to get somebody to make an actual logo for my business.
Right. Or the intentionality. Sometimes too, it's like, do you care about, and today to me, visual, I mean, since we're talking about visuals, the visual portion of branding in particular, that's just permission to play. I'm not trying to make this whole conversation not accessible for people or feel like pretentious in any way, but I honestly feel, my personal opinion is that you having a decent to good to great brand, something in that range, visually,
right,
is just, that's just permission to play. Like,
yes,
you know, I just think it just matters so much, and specifically to millennials who are homeowners now, like it doesn't matter as much to some, perhaps like the older generation, right? Maybe they don't care about it as much, but it's going to continue to matter more and more. And branding's bigger than visuals, but I just wanted to mention that because that dude, again, he could be fantastic, but no one would ever know. Yeah. And making sure that your visuals match the quality of what you're doing every day. It's like, why wouldn't you want that? Yeah. You know, why wouldn't you want that?
So some other things that, you know, just to zero in on why people should even care about branding. Brands not only attract great customers, but they attract great employees. And they retain great employees. It creates a sense of employee pride. If you can wear your company logo on your chest with pride because it represents something in the community, then you're excited to do that. You're excited to park the wrapped vehicle in your driveway at the end of the day, or you're excited to put on the polo golf shirt with the company logo and go into a business casual environment. So that is another great benefit. You can also look at it as crisis resilience. If you have a brand, if you have an established name in your community or in your space, when things like recessions come up, you have extra resilience built in because you have people that are willing to work with you and they want to work with you. Versus if you don't have an established people, if you're just the price point person, maybe you get some work, but you know, crisis can be the time when things dry up. When if you don't have a people to market to, then you're done.
So good.
Partnerships and collaborations. You can find people who are in parallel industries and you can work together. Your brands can do collaborations. You can promote nonprofits and charities that you're passionate about. If you have a brand and you can help them raise money or help them with extra volunteers or whatever that might be.
Yeah.
And then another thing is when you get to the point when you want to sell a business, having a brand associated with that's a valuable asset that people want to have.
Yeah.
And so that's you know, that even gets us into a little bit of, hey, what do I call my company?
Right.
Do I call it my own name?
Naming. Yeah.
Right.
That's something I love. I love naming businesses and nonprofits and stuff. It's just like there's so many ways to handle that. But I think one of the things that stuck out to me out of everything you just said was crisis resilience. I mean, that's to be able to view it that way takes wisdom. To say I am investing into a crisis resilience plan by having a great brand that stands for something.
Yeah.
Like our brand means something to people. It means something to our employees. When they put that on, it's like it's a badge of honor, you know? And I've worked for places that I've felt that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a really good feeling because it breeds culture too.
Yeah.
So it's all connected. And brand is just a piece of a lot of other things happening, but it's a really crucial piece that, you know, when we talk about why should anyone care about brand? Well, there's dotted lines from branding to every aspect of your business, whether you have a brand or not. If you're missing a brand,
Mm-hmm.
you are missing out on, it's like a key to
Mm-hmm.
unlocking another portion of your success, another portion of like your journey as a business at large. But I think a big thing is, where do people begin? Where do people start? Whether they're just starting a business for the first time, whether they have an established business, but now they're starting to say and realize, man, I got to start focusing on this more, giving more money, more budget, more attention.
Mm-hmm.
Even sometimes you don't even need to give budget. Sometimes you can just give more time and attention to something, and that will help progress it too. Eventually, you will have to put money in, right? So we can talk about that. But where do people start with brands? And you were just starting to say naming, right? So,
well, I just think naming is an interesting one, particularly when you're talking about a opportunity to sell your business. If you have an established name that is in the lexicon of people, whether it's local and in your community or it's national and in your industry, if people already identify that name as representing something, then that is an asset that you can sell as part of the business.
Yeah. I named a business that was a sports, it was a merino wool sports like material, like shirts and stuff, because it's moisture wicking.
Mm-hmm.
And we went through the whole naming process, the whole brand identity process, and
got some great names for you.
One of their heartbeats was to lessen the amount of things out of plastics within our shirts. So you and I are both wearing regular shirts that have micro amounts of plastic in them. And so they wanted to lessen that, but they also wanted to educate people about the importance of sustainability, all the things, right? Yeah. And I sat there and I pondered. I came up with like 4 or 5 really good names. And what we landed on was the name Lessen, Lesen.
Mm-hmm.
The beauty of Lessen was that it was to lessen the amount of plastics and all that stuff in the marketplace in that space, right? But then it also spoke to the idea of learning a lesson, so teaching and the education portion of their business.
Yeah.
And so now they had this brand that had purpose, right? They have, hey, our goal is to educate you about all these things, and then also eliminate the amount of plastics that we find in everyday wear. And so Lesson was like this beautiful, euphoria, I guess, of like, oh man, these two things mean, this one word means 2 different things, and they both align with what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think naming, it could go a million different ways, but finding the right name matters.
Yeah. And a lot of people just name their company after themselves.
Yeah.
It's here's my name. And I think depending on what your intentions are with the business, that's a really good idea. I know that in some cases, if you name a business after yourself, it becomes harder to sell because the new business owners potentially want to use their own name or their own likeness as part of the business, or they want to rebrand it, and then it doesn't have as much value to it. Although I know plenty of businesses that are owned by not the original founder, but they've been bought and they keep the family name on it just for brand recognition. But it was actually when I named my company Brand Nerd, I thought about that. I was like, I want to name this something that I can sell and anybody else can buy this and run with the name, and it means something.
The opposite of me, which is Pete Design Co.
Well, yeah.
I just need to find another Pete out there
who wants Pete's out there
who wants to buy my business. Yeah. So,
well, but yours. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but when you started yours, you intended to build a personal freelance design business, whereas I intended to build a company.
Right.
And so we thought about it in different terms. Yep. And
100%.
I don't think that's not what you did is not incorrect.
Yeah.
It's just what you decided to do.
Yeah. And in hindsight, actually, I'm like, I actually don't want to just be like a freelance designer. I have a million other things I want to do.
Right.
So I'm actually really glad. I'm glad I went about it that way, because now I feel like I have the flexibility to have that and then also explore other things.
And one of the things that's great about Brand Nerd that's actually been a real help is I can create extensions of the brand. So we can start a podcast and a podcast studio, and Brand Nerd still works for that because the name happens to be pretty broad.
Yeah.
Brand is such a broad topic, and nerd is just an accessible word. I mean, my thought when I started it was this idea of when you're in high school or college, there was this, there's this certain group of people that would convince and or pay nerds to do their homework, right? And I remember every now and then I'd like get wind of like, so-and-so pays people to do their assignments for them. Like, that makes total sense. So I just believed it. Who knows if it's true or not? But my thought was, Brand Nerd, you are now in a position where you can pay the nerds to do your marketing homework, to do your branding homework. So go ahead and pay the nerds.
Yeah. Deploy the nerds.
And it's a generational thing too. Deploy the nerds. Exactly. It's a generational thing too. Cause like my grandparents, you say nerd and they're like, oh, that's a derogatory, like that's a negative term, but nerd culture has become a thing to the point where I'm not even sure that I'm welcome in all nerd culture, like,
because you're not nerdy enough.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like,
I'm a well-rounded nerd. Like, I play sports.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You're athletic.
Right.
No, totally. And that's important to know. I even asked you that, I think, when we first met, and maybe talking about your own branding. I was just like, what does nerd mean to you? Because nerd does mean a lot of different things.
Yeah,
but
I nerd out over brand.
We nerd out over brands. Right.
And I mean, I've got some nerd credits. I've read Lord of the Rings a dozen times, and
this year alone.
No. But now that Andy Serkis, I mean, if you come into the office and I'm the only one in here, it's
lo-fi
Lord of the Rings on
so
repeat.
Good.
I love it.
I love that stuff.
Chill Robot. I think it's Chill Robot. Does a really awesome,
like on YouTube, like a playlist. Yeah.
He has an awesome, like 3-hour long, just ambient Lord of the Rings.
That was the one that had like Gandalf in the background every once in a while.
The only voice in it at any point is
like humming or something.
Well, yeah, that does have him humming, but at one point it goes, "The Lonely Mountain."
Yeah,
like it's just got that
just randomly
random sample in there. So where do you start with branding? I want to keep this moving forward. I don't want to ramble too much. It is season 0, but let's not embrace that mentality too much. Where do I start? Let's get some buzzwords out of the way, because I'm not a fan of jargon, but I just wanted to kind of like name a few, because we're going to drop them probably as we go through this. And we've said some already. Brand identity is the one. Brand identity is essentially, it's your logo, it's the colors, it's the fonts, it's the things visually that you use to represent your brand. And Pete is a brand identity expert.
That's where I live, but it's in the name. It's what people, it's identity. So what are people using to identify your brand? Brand is more than visual, but the visuals are what people are actually seeing with their eyes. People can't see integrity. they can see it acted out, but the actual integrity in and of itself is invisible until someone acts with integrity, right? Trustworthiness. Well, you can't see trustworthiness. It's not a real thing until someone acts trustworthy.
Sure.
And so in the same way, brand identity is the vehicle that that people respond to when they see it. So it's logo, it's color, it's typography, it's all those things working together to build trust. Next one.
Another way. Next. Another one is brand positioning.
I think that's one that gets thrown around that people think or don't always understand. And I know for a long time I was like, I didn't even know what positioning was. And now I feel like I have obviously a good understanding of it, but we should explain it.
I know from my marketing degree that the 4 P's of marketing, one of them is positioning. Beautiful. And anyways, positioning is this idea of where you fit in the marketplace. So we talked about it a little bit earlier when we used 3 examples of roofers of kind of like your cheap, your value, and your premium. It's good, better, best, or, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. But positioning is going, where do we fit in this this marketplace? And price is another one of the P's that also comes into that. So it's positioning not only where we are in value, but who are our people. There are a lot of different athletic companies out there. There's kind of your general athletic companies like your Nike, Adidas, all this stuff. But then you've got like Patagonia, which is like a brand built for the outdoors type. So they're a lot more uniquely positioned. Right. And for most brands, it's very hard to be everything to everybody. The big brands live there, but Nike started as running shoes. Their founder was a track runner, and so they started there, and over time built up a following and became the everything brand. It's very rare, a local-ish company out of Baltimore. Under Armour started when I was in like high school, or maybe a little bit before that, but I became aware of them in high school, and they started because they created all this compression, like undershirts and stuff that like really changed the game of your base layers for sports. Like I remember just wearing these soccer jerseys when I was in high school that were like these like, they might have just been pure plastic to refer to what you were talking about earlier with your wool company. But like, I remember them like when you would sweat, like it didn't like wick at all. It would just like suck to your body. like this. It was terrible. Yeah, it was very unflattering. But we discovered Under Armour, and we'd all wear that under the jersey somewhere in high school, and it became a lot better. So that's brand positioning. The one that I nerd out over, your brand identity, I'm brand messaging. That's the one that I get super.
We need to find another person who like gets crazy over brand positioning, and then we just have like the triune.
Well, I mean,
trinity of brand.
There's so many other buzzwords. I think when you think about your brand in terms of the message and the identity, you've got a pretty broad coverage of your brand right there.
And a lot of the times through those things, positioning comes out of that too. So I think you need to know messaging is really, and you'll talk about this, but it's what you're communicating, right? In its simplest form. Brand identity is what you look like.
Right.
And those two things can create where you're going to end up being positioned in the marketplace. Whereas you can position yourself a certain way, have the right messaging, but people don't know what to look for, right? Like, so not to make hierarchy out of them, like not to say one is more important than the other, but in some ways with one in, with identity and messaging taking place, you can figure out positioning.
It depends on the company and the industry that you're in, things like that. But your brand message is the words you use to describe your products and services. And the unavoidable fact is that people don't buy from you until they read or hear words, period. Whether that is from somebody else saying, hey, I use these people and they're great. That's hearing words. And one of the things we talk about with brand messaging is giving your customers words to use to describe you. That setting the expectation of, hey, we're gonna put a roof on your house and there's no mess. You know, there's a local company here that coined the term "new roof, no mess." I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, they actually make the equipment that roofers use to make sure that they don't make much of a mess, and then help clean up at the end. So like, no new roof, no mess. That is
So memorable.
so memorable. But if you give your customers the words and then the experience to tell their friends, to go, hey, they put a roof on my house, I could not find a single shred of evidence that they were there the next day. You know, that is a message that they received from you, bought into, had the experience, and then shared with somebody else. So people don't buy until they hear or read words, just period.
Yeah.
So that's why I think brand messaging is so important. You know, I mean, you can even say a logo has words in it. So,
Right. And then part of the story brand stuff within messaging, because that fits within messaging.
Yep. StoryBrand is a messaging framework.
Yeah. So that is essentially then creating a narrative, right? Because you can say something like new roof, no mess.
Yeah.
Super memorable, great phrase. But you can also take that then and create a story around it, right? So like something, you know, you were in the house with your family having a great time, you noticed a leak. You reached out to this person, you know, and then you create this like this problem. You make it your client the hero, or you know, the company the hero.
Yeah. Or even you remember the last time your last home also needed a new roof.
Yeah.
And you remember the poor experience that you had with the roofing company that drove their trucks directly into your yard.
Yeah.
And they, you know, left a bunch of nails and material in the yard that you didn't see the next day, but discovered it for months and years later. Right. You know, you'd be walking through your yard and you'd step on something, or, you know.
And that's, to me, the story aspect of it, the narrative aspect of using that new roof, no mess, you know, as the example. That all like starts to become critical when you're creating copy and content for like deliverables. So your website, your like a business card, a pamphlet, like when people are seeing your brand in the real world, in the wild, what are on those things? And that's where those stories actually resonate with people. Because your website. I mean, we do websites.
Absolutely.
We do websites. So that's kind of how our minds work. And I just think when it comes to that narrative aspect, that's website, that's where it lives. That's where the storytelling, you can do so much good storytelling there to win clients and customers.
Yeah. And that's what I love about StoryBrand, having been certified for 5 years and helped over 100 companies literally go through the StoryBrand framework. I've seen firsthand the light bulbs that occur when people think about their business in terms of a story, think about their message in terms of a story. And the caveat, the big pivot in thinking with StoryBrand is that this story is a hero's journey, but the hero is your customer.
Right.
So many companies, they position themselves as a hero. They say, we'll come save you. But people they're not looking for a savior. They're looking for a guide. They're looking for somebody that's going to help them win the day.
Right.
They're not looking for you to win the day or save the day. They're looking for somebody to help them win the day.
Yeah.
They don't want a new roof. They want their house to be safe and more beautiful.
Right.
And they want to be the person who made the great decision to hire you because you're good at what you do. And then the neighbor comes over and goes, man, new roof looks great. Who'd you hire?
Yeah.
that is, you know.
And then in that moment, they feel like the hero. They feel like the one who made the great choice. Right. And you were the guide along the way.
Yeah. So that's what brand messaging is. Just some others, you know, there's brand perception, brand promise, brand experience. We don't talk about those things because it's not really in our it's not that it's not in our wheelhouse, but perception is more that equation of expectations versus reality. You know, that's how I would explain that. Promise is, yeah, what's your brand promise? We do get into that a little bit with our messaging because it's often good to offer some sort of guarantee or promise that helps people buy in a little bit more to what you're offering. Because if you're making claims, then back it up with some sort of guarantee or promise. Same with brand experience. That not something that we get into a whole lot. I think when I think of brand experience, the thing I think of is like pop-up shops, you know, like this idea that you can create an experience, you know, like South by Southwest has this, you know, there's these awesome brand experiences. But you can do the same thing in your local business by how you answer the phone.
Right.
By the form that they fill out on your website. Is that something that you respond to immediately?
Yeah.
Or is that something that stays in the inbox for several days or weeks before there's ever an attempt at a callback?
Yeah.
There's nothing that annoys me more as somebody who lives in this world than submitting a form on a website and not hearing back from that company in a timely fashion, or not hearing from them at all.
Oh, that's terrible.
I've not hired several vendors because of just their lack of timeliness. You know, like if I'm gathering quotes for something and they don't get back to me and I'm like, I technically could still, I have time to get a quote from them, but like I've already got 3 lined up. I'm just going to go with one of them.
Yep. The best ability is availability.
Ooh.
I heard someone say that. I usually hear it in reference to sports with injuries, like in the NFL, right?
Okay.
People will be like, hey, the best ability is availability. And if you're not available to play, well, that sucks for you. But I think that's true, man. I've heard just being available and responsive is massive. Like if you can get back to someone the same day when they reach out to you and get them what they need or whatever it might be, it's like you're going to set yourself up. That's like it's amazing how many small businesses probably struggle for good reasons.
Yeah.
You know, they're busy, they have a lot of stuff going on, maybe whatever it is, but if there's a simple way to simplify that with a pre-made email that you can send back. Yeah.
And that's where we come in with those companies. I tell people all the time, I can't answer the phones for you, but I can help you know what to say.
Yeah.
I can't help you get back to new leads through your website, but I can make it as easy as possible. I can automate the reply so that you don't, at least they're not wondering if it even went through.
Right. We can create a series of 10 email responses, and depending on what that person says, you can pop one in,
exactly,
and fill in whatever needs customized,
right,
and send it back to them. Like there's so many ways to not expedite, but make that more efficient. Automate is the right word. Yeah. I was going to mention about brand experience, but I can't remember. So disregard the steps. I think looking at the steps of how all this comes about, specifically, again, our vantage point is websites for the most part, but we do get into brand identity. We get into we can just message a brand. But there are steps that people have to take. The good news is you don't have to take them alone. We, as the guide, I guess, because for us, it's a little funny because we work with clients who work with their clients.
Yeah.
So there's an extra step there. So if we're doing StoryBrand for Brand Nerd, well, we're the guide, and then the business is the hero.
Yeah.
Right. For them, if we're walking them through StoryBrand, their client is the hero, and they're the guide.
Yeah. And I will say, it is incredibly difficult to do this on your own.
Yeah.
To establish a brand strategy without outside help is incredibly difficult. I struggle to do it with Brand Nerd all the time.
Yeah.
Like every time you walk in here, I'm bouncing something off you, right? Yeah. Because I'm constantly going, man, is this what we're talking about? Like, and it's partially my fault too, because I'm self-diagnosed with idearrhea. I've just got ideas constantly, and so a lot of that is focused directly on Brand Nerd and all the things that can be done, and we should be doing this, and why aren't we doing this? The reality is you need somebody who's got fresh eyes,
Yeah.
expertise to come in and help you look at this. In fact, when I work with a client, I spend very little time doing a ton of research on their current product offering, positioning, even their image until we get into those strategy sessions, because I want to be as fresh as possible. If something is shockingly offensive to me, I want them to see that it's shockingly offensive. And I also don't want to soften my own, like, I don't want to, if you see something and it offends you day one, day two, you're already ready for it.
Yeah.
So as much as I can be, I try to be fresh going into those so that my instinct is there for like, oh, that's bad.
Yeah.
We do not want to do that. We gotta fix that right away.
There's an example that I'll share really quick. It's one of my personal clients, and they would totally be okay with me sharing this. So it's not me saying something that I would never say to them. But they had a financial issues show. It was called Financial Issues, right? And it was essentially, think like Dave Ramsey style show, a very big personality who's the host of the show and had all the like hot takes and different things. So the show blew up, nationally syndicated radio program.
Mm-hmm.
And from that show, they started a like nonprofit organization ministry to help. And they essentially, what they became is this production company of shows, right? Programming. But their name now is based on the original show, right? It's like Financial Issues Ministries or something, Stewardship Ministries. But now there's this massive confusion. And this is just to give a quick example of, there's now the show is called Financial Issues, but their name as the business is Financial Issues. Yeah. And people are always confused. And even internally, sometimes they use language and I'm like, wait, you guys are talking about the show or are we talking about the ministry here? And I've been on meetings where, because I'm newer to their team as, they're a client of mine, I will have those reactions where everybody else in the team knows what they're talking, like knows what each other's talking about.
Yeah, sure.
So I'll be like, hold up, pause. Are we talking about this or are we talking about that?
Yeah.
And then those moments I think are really beneficial to them because they're like, oh yeah, like this is really confusing to people. And so I think part of being a really good guide in any capacity is not overthinking it, bringing fresh eyes, bringing fresh perspective, because that's what people ultimately are hiring you to do to some extent. Even when you're a landscaper, right? People are like bringing you on to say, help me, I think I know what I want.
Yeah.
But help me think about this space correctly. And I know that there's things I'm not considering. And you go, oh, 100%, you can't do that. That's not going to work here. Right. That could work over here. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And not only is there confusion when it comes to things like, hey, we've got a branding issue, we've got a naming issue here. There's also just industry jargon can really get in the way. If you like one that pops into my head, if you don't understand what variable valve timing is on a vehicle, you don't care about variable valve timing.
I don't know what that is.
I do a little bit.
I don't.
I'm not going to bother explaining it.
I don't care.
It's essentially the timing of the cylinder valves on your car and how efficient it is at turning fuel into propulsion.
Yeah, wow.
But if your car salesman's going, well, this model's got variable valve timing, and you're like, okay,
what does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. But if he says this car's faster, or it gets 0 to 60 faster, or even better, perhaps it gets 4 miles to the gallon better fuel economy, you're like, oh, I'm in. I know exactly what that means. Like I get 4 extra miles per gallon of fuel. Like,
so there's a concept and you're making that concept relatable and approachable through how you are speaking about it. Right. And so brands need to be doing that, is what you're saying. Like,
so when you bring in an outside expert, they can identify these areas of jargon, of confusion that you might be having with your customers. Because if you confuse your customers, they're more likely to just click over to the next thing or walk over to the next thing. Or I don't know if this is for me because I don't really understand. It's not speaking to me. I don't get what they're saying.
Yeah. You know what I would love to do, and I think it would be a fantastic segment on this show, would be to have submissions of people's brands
Yeah.
and be able to constructively give feedback on it and say like, hey, submit your website, submit whatever it is, and we'll give you a couple, no matter where it is, we will give you a couple of ideas on how to refine it. We're not, you know what I'm saying? Like, and you take it and you can just,
dude, no
that
joke.
would be fun.
No joke. On the website examples of our page right now is a button that if you click, it says free website review. And if you click, it goes to a form, because 2 days ago, I was sitting there going, what would be really valuable content for
No
people?
way.
It would be
No way, dude.
if we could review people's work
Sites.
in real
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
You know,
And we'll give you tangible things.
Yeah.
Like here are 4 or 5 little changes that you can run with.
literally something I would charge $2,000 or more for.
Yeah.
I would do for the sake of the pod,
Yeah.
for the sake of
exactly.
content, and
Yeah.
for the sake of like illuminating folks out there.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a cool segment that we could just do. So if you have a website or a brand or anything, fine. Where is it again on the website currently?
So the page is it's thebrandnerd.com/storybrand-website-examples. However, we will put a link in all the things.
Yeah.
And just put it there.
Put a link down
Now that
below.
this is an official. Literally for me, this is something I do sometimes. I get an idea and I just go, the website gets a couple thousand visitors a month. Like, let's just throw a button on one of the most popular pages and see if people click it. It has almost no explanation
Yeah.
of what it is.
Yep.
It's actually pretty terrible in terms of like marketing wise.
Yeah.
But in terms of the idea, I got it out there, which is a win for me, because sometimes I can really procrastinate on these things.
It's also really cool that we both had the same idea.
Yeah.
I'm just 2 days later. Which is like everything in life right now. Like I'm just like a season behind you. If you have a brand, a website, whatever it is, it doesn't have to even be a website. You could take a picture of a business card and you're like, hey, this is all I have. And I know businesses, local businesses that just have business cards made, and you made it on Paint, Microsoft Paint or something. Send it in, and we will give you tangible ways that you can make it better quickly. Not super pie in the sky things. Go hire an agency. These are like, hey, here's something you can do right now to make this a little bit better.
Yeah.
And we'll drop a link to that in the description box wherever you are listening to it or watching this podcast. Mitch.
Well, I 100%, like, that's something that we need to have people do. I want to run through the steps, because that was something we had written here, and something that is important that I think people understand, that when we go through the branding process, when we go through your strategy, which is where we start with every project, after we develop your strategy, which involves target audience or character, then we get into message. And a lot of branding agencies actually bump messaging further down the list. But with the StoryBrand framework, it reveals so many things about the business that I want to do messaging before we ever get into visual identity and things like that. Especially if we're doing a full rebrand.
Yeah.
Like, how valuable is it to you as a designer to already know the story that we're telling?
Yeah, it's incredibly meaningful. It's incredible. It makes my job easier because I'm not guessing. I'm not trying to connect dots. The dots are already connected for me. And I mean, personally, I can connect those dots. Like, I have the experience to do so. But I know that there are a lot of designers, junior designers, mid-level designers that just want to do the work.
Yeah.
And that's okay. They just want to do the work, but they don't want to
just want to create a cool logo.
They just want to create something awesome, and they're
Does
fully
this look
capable.
good on my portfolio, which, granted, that there's an aspect to that. Like, you gotta learn the chops and find all the things, but at the same time, these are business assets, and if it doesn't help sell the business, and it even comes down to things like something I think about when it comes to a logo is, where is this going to be used in this business?
Yeah.
If they're going to be embroidering this logo on things, I have to take that into consideration. You can't do too many fine little details. You got to avoid like gradients and stuff like that, because unless embroidery technology
Changes.
changes,
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody now has like you embroider it in white and then dye it with, I don't know. There's probably a way, but like a gradient, is going to be very difficult to translate. I've seen a lot of logos that essentially instead of the gradient, it's just two colors. Like they essentially just put a line and like there it is.
Or have a version of the logo that is black and white.
Right.
Right.
You
Like
can do
approach
that
it that way too. But
yeah, but there's some I've seen logos that they don't have a black and white version, or they don't know to use that. The business owner or whatever doesn't know to use that on certain things. Or
I just had someone yesterday, and we'll keep going, but I just had someone yesterday reach out to me in my DM and say, hey, can you put our logo next to this other logo that we have, because we want to get hats done, and we need it done like today or something. And it goes to show again, it's like people don't always have the ability to like, they have a logo, but they don't understand how it works. And like, does your logo look good with this other logo that you want to put it on a hat with?
Yeah.
And so, anyway, we were just talking about specifically the value of messaging and making sure we're doing messaging first for brand stuff.
So we start, after we've gone through the general strategy stuff and really understanding the business and where they want to go, we get into messaging. And with that messaging process, we go through the StoryBrand framework that, again, places the customer as the hero, the brand as the guide, and we actually use the hero's journey to create awesome marketing messaging collateral that can be used in pieces. There's like 7 buckets that come out of that can be used in total to tell a complete story, or you can hit on specific themes for different marketing things. My favorite is to hit on a philosophical problem, because that's kind of that's that twisting feeling in your chest and your gut, that something is just wrong with this situation. Like this is too expensive. I don't think there's value here, or this is wrong. Like politics, is big on philosophical messaging. Like, nobody should go hungry. Like that's a philosophical statement,
right?
And one everybody can get on board with, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, like I love that part of it, but then we get into the visual part of it, the logo, the colors, the website, the shapes and forms and images and brand guidelines, which is so critical. So many businesses don't have an established brand guideline around their logo. Yeah. And then when they go to get those hats made, those t-shirts made, when they go to a vendor for brochures, they're just winging it.
Right.
They go, here's our logo, well, what are your colors? Well, I don't know, take it from the logo file I sent you.
Right. I think that's brand guidelines in short it's just a tool. It's a document that encompasses your entire brand, and it tells you, hey, what not to do, what to do. Here's your typefaces or fonts. Here's your colors. And I think there's a lot of times where you're working with third-party vendors. You might say, well, what's the big deal if they reach out and say, hey, what's the color on my logo? Well, do you have the Adobe programs to open up a file and check the specific color? Probably not.
Right.
And if you do know even if you do know the colors, right, and you just know them in the back of your head, you haven't written down on a sticky note somewhere, that's a micro decision that you don't need to make. If a vendor reaches out and you send them stuff to do a hat, you can send them the logo files and the brand guidelines and just be done with it. And they should be able to read the brand guidelines and say, oh, that hex code or that CMYK breakdown is this. We run with it. We don't even have to email you back and ask the question.
Right. You don't have to be stuck in what's an RGB, what's a CMYK, what's a Pantone,
So that's just one of the many tools that we offer.
Jargon.
We offer.
So then that's when once we have all of that stuff established, that's when we start building. We build websites, we help you develop brochures and any other collateral that you need, really, as long as it fits in the digital and or print fields. We're all about that. And then the continuing process from that, a brand helping you stay on brand with things like brand guidelines and having a messaging document that you can call back on as a foundational part of your business that helps you stay on brand, and then it helps you adapt and innovate as things come up, as the world changes, as your business changes. You are able to take what we create for you and morph it for the future. Mm-hmm.
All right. I think just asking the question, and I want to, mention this is just being open. What can a brand do for your business?
Mm-hmm.
What could just, again, don't be overwhelmed by this whole conversation. I mean, we're talking about a lot of different things, and hopefully we broke it down for dummies, right? That was the point, branding for dummies.
Yeah.
But don't be overwhelmed by the conversation. Just ask yourself, man, how can I take one step towards building a brand or even refining the brand that I have? If you have an existing brand, cool. Do you have the right messaging?
Yeah.
Like just asking yourself and being open, holding your business with open hands and saying like, man, there's ways that I can make this better, right? I don't need to be the lid. Like I can hold this with open hands and look to other people and invite other voices into what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And say, how can this be better? Here's what I have, right?
Yeah.
Like how can we make this more successful? And I think that's just powerful. That posture is powerful in and of itself. Like if you approach any business like Brand Nerd or anything with that posture, there's nothing that you can't do with someone who's just open like that. Yeah. So it's probably a good place to land the plane for the day, huh?
Yeah, I want to do a quick season 0 update.
Yeah, let's do it.
Just because for those mighty few who are listening at this point, and I mean we've seen some traction for sure on YouTube. A lot of this stuff is video. You can also see video on Spotify, and you can. I think we're on 10 different podcasting platforms. I pretty much just did all the ones I could find. Yeah. So I want to make it so that people can find us. Again, this is season 0. We are doing the highest quality we can manage. Yep. And
excellent.
Certainly from the audio and visual standpoint, I think we're probably above what most beginners are at. I think from the scripting and editing, all that stuff, we're going to keep improving week over week, and we're going to put the reps in, the time in. But I look forward to doing this every Friday.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm just super excited about that. And one of the things that I said previously is I want to have a record of this progress. I want people to be able to go back and see where this thing started. Yeah. And that's what gets me excited. It'd be so easy to, let's say we get some traction in a better show format, or one that's more on target for what we're trying to accomplish. I don't want to just go, well, let's delete all the stuff that didn't, I want this to be there for people to go back and say, okay, because we're going to, we tell people like, you got to put the time in, you got to put the reps, you got to practice, you got to do it. So we can be an example of that. So yeah, I think we're going to keep doing this every Friday. We've got some guests that have agreed to do the podcast, though we don't have times for them because, again, I want to do this the right way. I want to get reps in, and even when we have guests, it doesn't mean that Pete goes away because Pete's a critical part of this. And
I'll just be off camera somewhere talking into a mic.
It depends on the guest. It depends on the, and I think, hopefully we'll get to the point where we're recording more than one thing per week, and there's more to do. So, and also I want to do a quick studio update just because I know people are curious about that. We're investing in more sound treatment and a few more lights and some stuff like that because this room is pretty echoey. And the plan is to launch that in June, do some outreach to local podcasters. If you know podcasters in the kind of like Lancaster, PA, York, PA, Harrisburg, PA, that area that want to come out and do a free session, we'd love to have them here and just get their feedback, but also send them away with a pretty awesome video.
Ironically, you said feedback, which is like a pun because we don't want feedback. No feedback, but we want your feedback.
We want that feedback loop.
Yeah.
Not audio, but personal and business feedback loop. So we'll start doing some more outreach and marketing for that in June. But before signing off, I just want to say thank you for listening to the Brand Nerd podcast. You can go to brandnerd.ai and sign up for our newsletter. That is my personal AI fascination newsletter that I'm sending out. And I just think it's insane what you can do with AI, and it can increase your productivity. I use it every day. I used it to help set up this podcast, to be honest. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.
Peace.
If you enjoyed this Brand Nerd podcast clip, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. In the meantime, here are additional videos you might find illuminating.